Let's watch Ben Shapiro in the belly of the beast at Oxford University, where he's being grilled about his views on Israel. As always, Ben is an articulate and clear defender of Israel in the media. Have a watch.
Thank you very much for joining us today. There are some students outside protesting the mere fact that you're speaking here. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, it's a free country, thank God. This is a wonderful Western country in which people have the ability to dissent, which is not true of an enormous number of countries in the world. First of all, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. And I want to thank you in particular for having me, because I've spoken to other people who are members of the union, and I know that you have some qualms about, or you had some qualms about doing this conversation, so I really appreciate the fact that you're actually taking the time to have the conversation. I think it's wonderful. The fact that people protest you is nothing new. I mean, people on the right protest people on the left protest people on the right. I say things that I think are true. Some people find those things to be controversial. I did want to take a bit of a moment to make a bit of an opening statement. I know that that wasn't supposed to be part of the plan, but since it was good enough for Stormy Daniels, I figured it was good enough for me. I did think pretty seriously about who I had to shag in order to get an opening statement, and as it turns out, for Stormy, the answer is everyone. But the opening statement tonight is pretty serious because of obviously the world events that we're watching around us, which is the real reason that you're hearing people outside chanting genocidal slogans like "From the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free," which is in fact a genocidal slogan. The river they're talking about is the Jordan River. The sea they're talking about is the Mediterranean Sea. The real question is why that has become such a common sentiment in the West. Why it is that this has become such a common sentiment that you see 100,000 people marching in the streets of London in a pro-Hamas rally. Or why it is you see widespread sentiment honeycombed throughout American universities and universities throughout the West in favor of Hamas after Hamas committed the worst pogrom against Jews since the Holocaust. And let me be extremely clear about this. I brought some visual aids for those people who don't actually believe what is eminently true, which is that Hamas is not the same as the West. Hamas is not morally equivalent to Israel. If you don't believe me, this is what Hamas is. This is what Hamas is. Hamas is murdered babies burned in their cribs. What Hamas is Shani Luke. Shani Luke's body, her head was found today, her skull was found today. She's a young woman, she's 22 years old, and she was murdered by Hamas and taken back to the Gaza Strip, where she was put in the back of a truck. Anyone who draws moral equivalence between Hamas and Israel, between Hamas and the Jews, is a Jew hater, full stop, end of story. So the question is, why exactly that's become such a common sentiment in the West? And the answer is because the West is ashamed of its own values. In fact, what the West really is ashamed of the superiority of its own values. Not everybody thinks the same way. Not everybody thinks the same way. Now, there are plenty of political disagreements to be had on all sides. There are plenty of disagreements to be had with regard to a two-state solution. But there is no disagreement to be had between the values of Hamas and the people who support Hamas and the values of the state of Israel or the values of the West. Anybody who equates those values is making a serious category error. The West has become shy about its own principles. The West has become humiliated by its own principles and instead has decided to substitute an idiotic notion that everybody thinks the same way, and it's not true. And because the West thinks that, the West falls into these category errors where they believe you can buy off terrorist groups like Hamas, where they believe that Hamas's actual goal is not what they say. Hamas openly says their goal is to exterminate all Jews. But we can't believe them because we're so paternalistic that we believe that we don't believe them. It must be economic discontent. It must be a land dispute. Or maybe it turns out that people who burn babies in their cribs, who rape mothers in front of their children and then murder both of them, maybe they don't think like you. Maybe they don't think like me. Maybe these are people who have a different worldview, and that worldview cannot be combated by pretending it away with morally relativistic bullshit. Maybe that is what we are watching in the West. And so what the West actually has to do is start to have a little bit more respect for its own values. And back in 1933, this union voted in humiliating fashion the so-called Oxford Oath that they would not defend king and country. And that was used by people like Hitler, like Mussolini, to believe that the West was weak. Any civilization that will not defend its own values, any civilization that creates an equation between its own values and the values of groups like Hamas is weak. And that is not something the West can afford. Now, 6 million Jews died in camps and died in ditches waiting for the West to discover that its values were superior to the values of the Nazis. The state of Israel exists so that the Jews don't have to wait anymore, and thank God for that. But this is not about Israel for the West. What it is about is whether the West is going to defend values that actually matter. It's about whether the West is going to recognize once and for all that its values are not the same as those of groups like Hamas, that not everything can be talked out in negotiations in a room. that the people who would do the sorts of things that we saw on October 7th are not morally equivalent to people who try to target those terrorists, who are trying to kill those terrorists, while the terrorists themselves are bragging about putting civilians atop their rockets. Okay, any moral equivalence that's drawn in this conflict by the people who are chanting outside should be treated as evidence of anti-Semitism, because there has never been a clearer moral contrast than what we are seeing right now. There's been a lot of talk about the two-state solution, about the Israeli-Arab conflict over the course of decades. That's obviously going to continue. But if you cannot take sides between what we saw on October 7th and what we see in Hamas and what Israel is doing in response, you have lost all moral credibility.
In a 2019 interview, you said that hate speech is a principle that does not exist. And in 2021, you said that no one should be fired over a tweet. However, just a couple of weeks ago, you tweeted that if you work in the media and uncritically and reflexively parrot the genocidal, Jew-hating terrorist liars Hamas, you should be fired. So why have you drawn a line there? Why do you draw a line for people that you disagree with, but for yourself there is no line?
Oh no, I draw a line for people I disagree with when those people tend to back terrorist groups. So if you back a terrorist group, I don't feel that you are within the boundaries of free speech. I don't think there's no such thing as an Overton window. There certainly is an Overton window. I just think it's very, very broad. I think openly supporting terrorist groups is beyond the Overton window. Also, by the way, if you're parroting the claims of Hamas.
So is that hate speech? Is that hate speech?
So no,
you said it's not free speech.
Hate speech is not a legal category. Hate speech as punishable by the government is not a legal category. That's a different thing from the idea that I have an obligation as an employer to hire somebody who supports Hamas or Al-Qaeda. I certainly do not. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the members of the media parroting Hamas, they shouldn't just be fired because they support Hamas. They should be fired because they're unbelievably crappy at their jobs. If you're parroting the Gaza Ministry of Health, which routinely lies about its statistics, as said by the Washington Post in 2014 and the New York Times in 2014, and still the Washington Post and New York Times are uncritically parroting Hamas, well, at that point, you're really bad at your job. And you should be fired for being that bad at your job.
So it's okay for you to say things like, I know you've come under fire for this a lot, but the Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage tweets.
I'm so glad you asked about this. So.
No, I knew this was going to come up, but you then later doubled down on it and said it wasn't just Arabs that it wasn't just. You said there are many, many Christian Muslim Arabs who are wonderful people, just not the ones who oppose Israel in the Israel-Arab conflict.
Yes.
So you are allowed to say things like that about certain groups.
Oh, I think anybody's allowed to say that.
But anyone else can lose their job if they say things.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm not entitled to a job. I'm saying that as a general principle, we should be very careful about who we fire and who we cancel and for what we cancel people. That doesn't mean
that
there aren't...
So you're okay with it for some things?
Well, I mean, I think even on the right, there are certain things where I think that they pass the line of the Overton window and you can be fired for that, of course. I mean, I'm not saying there's no line whatsoever. If you come out tomorrow and you start flying a swastika at your place of work, I think that you can be fired for that. But I think that, you know, when we talk about, you know, what I said back in 2010, as you mentioned, I mean, I can read you the rest of the tweets, okay? In the post regarding Israelis versus Arabs, this is September 27th, 2010, so it's always fun when people pull up tweets that are 13 years old, but since I knew this was coming, we may as well do it. In the post regarding Israelis versus Arabs, I wrote about Arabs who take part in the Israeli-Arab conflict, as anyone who can read knows. Apologies. You're correct, slurs about Arabs. Not all Arabs like open sewage and blowing things up. I was specifically talking, by the way, in these tweets about Hamas and its allies. And just to make very clear, Hamas does like living in sewage and blowing shit up. That is actually Hamas's goal. This is why they have all of their resources right now hidden underground. This is why they have hundreds of gallons of fuel that they are not giving to the civilians in the Gaza Strip. This is why Hamas took literal water pipes out of the ground and refashioned them into rockets. I mean, the idea, obviously, that, as I say, even in that tweet thread, that all Arabs are in this category is not true. But it is true that Hamas is a terrorist group that would prefer to murder innocent people and get its own innocent civilians killed than to even care for those civilians. By the way, they openly say this. I mean, this is the part that's crazy. I mean, Hamas actually says this. One of the top Hamas officials literally said today that they do not care about their civilians, that it is the job of the UN and Israel to take care of their civilians. It's not their job. They're too busy in the tunnels.
Recently, you appeared on your show and you said the only solution is for Israel to annex the Gaza Strip and kill enough sons of bitches to make sure this doesn't happen again. Is that not using the same rhetoric the same bigotry and
Kill
violent rhetoric
terrorists.
that you are accusing others of using?
No, because I'm talking about Hamas.
For?
No, I'm talking about Hamas. They should kill as many Hamas sons as bitches as they can find. How many Nazis do you have to kill to stop Nazi Germany?
Do you not make a distinction between Hamas and innocent Palestinian civilians?
Of course I do. You're the one who's not. When I say sons of bitches, I'm specifically referring to Hamas. I've made clear in every single podcast that I have done that civilians that the Israeli government seeks to protect civilians. They do. The amount. I mean, I've seen the tapes. I've seen the actual operations that they do. The attempts they make to protect civilians are so far and away more than anything remotely like anything else in the region or really in the world, that to suggest otherwise is ridiculous. And of course, when I'm speaking about the sons of bitches, I'm not talking about normal Gazan civilians who I've routinely suggested ought to be protected as best can be done in a war zone. That's not the same thing, but when it comes to Hamas, yes, I hope that they kill every single member of Hamas. I hope that every single member of Hamas is killed.
But the Gaza death toll is now reported to be over 5,000. Almost half of the population of Gaza is under the age of 18, and those are statistics that have been supported by the WHO and Save the Children. Israel has recently turned off the electricity, water supply, and you've spoken about this issue about Israel and Palestine a lot in recent interviews. You've rightly condemned the atrocities that occurred on October 7th to innocent Israeli civilians. I tried to find videos of you condemning the deaths of innocent Palestinian civilians at the hands of the IDF or Israel, but I couldn't find any.
Right, because I don't draw moral equivalence.
I just wanted to ask you directly, will you condemn the deaths of innocent Palestinian civilians in the same way that you do innocent Israeli ones?
Absolutely not. And the reason I will not is because the killing is not done in the same way or with the same purpose. That's like saying that do I condemn? That's like saying, will I condemn the person who murders a baby in their bed by burning them alive the same way that I condemn the police officer who's trying to arrest that person and accidentally kill someone in the process? Of course not. Those are not the same thing, not remotely.
But there have been innocent. Do you not sympathize with the life of an innocent Palestinian child?
Of course I do. That's why
way?
Hamas should surrender today. Hamas should surrender today. This bullshit that it's Israel's responsibility to protect Gazan civilians in a way that Hamas doesn't have to protect Gazan civilians, or that what's happening right now is not the result of Hamas's terrorism and currently holding over 200 hostages, including babies, in custody. That's insane. Trying to draw a moral equivalence between people who are making targeted strikes against terrorists, who are hiding underground in tunnels deliberately, violating international law, in violation of the Geneva Conventions, holding the other side civilians underneath the ground while not providing their own people fuel, not providing them food, not providing them medicine, and that I'm supposed to equate Israel attempting to make targeted strikes with Hamas literally sending 2,000 terrorists across another nation's border and into civilian areas with no military goal. With purely the goal of murdering those civilians? Let me ask you, why exactly would you equate?
I'm asking you questions Mr. Shapiro.
You got several questions, so I'm asking. Honestly, I'm going to ask you the same question. Why would you?
I am asking you the questions here. I find it really concerning that you're not prepared.
Why won't you answer the question?
I find it really concerning that you're not prepared to condemn, to even admit that it's sad when an innocent Palestinian child dies.
Of course it's sad. I just said it's sad.
In the same way that it's sad when an innocent Israeli civilian dies.
Of course it's
Why are those two not equally saddening to you?
I'm of course incredibly sad when anybody who's innocent dies, but it is not the same evil when somebody murders a baby in their crib as when someone tries to kill a terrorist. And
the key word is condemning. You shouldn't condemn the IDF the same way you condemn Hamas, because one is intentional, one is not.
A terrorist is hiding behind the baby. That's not the same thing.
But innocent Palestinian children have lost their lives.
Of course they have, and Hamas should be blamed for all of that.
The word is condemn. She asked you condemn.
And Hamas should surrender today. Will you call on Hamas to surrender?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then we're in agreement. Great.
Okay. You have recently shifted from, or not recently, you have also shifted from doing a lot of serious interviews on Israel-Palestine to moving to more pop culture sort of things like your 43 minutes commentary on the Barbie movie.
Sort of the reverse. To be fair, I did the Barbie movie first, and then war broke out in the Middle East.
Fair enough.
I didn't do the Barbie movie after that.
No. Why do you? Why have you decided to do this? Why the shift? Why doing them both at the same time? why the 43-minute long rant about the Barbie movie?
Because it was funny.
That's great stuff from Ben. As ever, Ben is quick on his feet and he makes all the key points here. It's amazing, by the way, to see how figures like Ben Shapiro, who, you know, some people that liked him would follow him, 15 years ago on his niche channels, or occasionally he'd get a platform on CNN. And today, because of the rise of new media, he's managed to explode online, and so many people have had voices, including myself, including JTV. I'd never be able to do what we do today 15, 20 years ago. And that's all thanks to social media. The fact that he is invited to speak at Oxford seen as a big player in the world of political media, it's really quite remarkable. And I think it should be very encouraging to all of us to know that the more we do online, the more we keep sharing this kind of content, the more we keep building, the greater the influence we'll have. Before we wrap up, I want to share something important with you. The entire anti-Israel movement is built on one central accusation: that in 1948, Israel stole the land, and ever since, Palestinians have simply been resisting. But what if everything we've been told about this story is untrue? What if the real history of 1948 shows not Arabs being forced out, but Jews, while seeking peace, having to fight for their survival against a genocidal enemy that willed its destruction long before Israel's re-establishment? Have a watch of the trailer for our new, groundbreaking and essential documentary entitled What Really Happened in 1948. And if you want to see the full film, just click the link in the video description. In 1948, the world witnessed the rebirth of the Jewish state, the State of Israel. A moment celebrated as a miracle of survival and self-determination after centuries of persecution and the horrors of the Holocaust. Yet for decades, this event has been twisted into a narrative of theft and catastrophe, with the so-called Nakba portrayed as Israel's original sin, where Jews allegedly stole Arab land and displaced innocents in a premeditated act of ethnic cleansing. But what if this story is fundamentally inverted? What if the cause and effect are the other way around? Not Israel aggressively seizing territory and Arabs responding in self-defense, but Arabs, driven by deep-seated hatred, rejecting the Jews' legal and historical rights to live in their ancestral homeland and waging a genocidal war long before Israel's re-establishment. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to uncover the unvarnished truth about 1948, the centuries of pogroms and anti-Semitic violence that set the stage, the Arab leaders' explicit calls for extermination, and the defensive war Israel fought to secure its existence. We'll challenge the pervasive lies head-on, showing how Arab rejection of peace wasn't about creating a Palestinian state, but about denying Jews the right to live at all. From the Nazi-allied leader of the Arabs in Palestine, the Mufti al-Husseini, to the forgotten occupations by Jordan and Egypt, when no Palestinian state was even considered, this is the story of a conflict rooted not in displacement, but in whether the Jews deserve to live in their homeland. Join us as we debunk the myths with facts, confront the historical record fairly but firmly, and reveal why 1948 was not an act of aggression, but a righteous response to annihilation. This is what really happened in 1948. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.